Welcome to episode 5 of our Tech Talks, where we talk data mesh in practice. Very interesting episode today because we don't talk about what technology is best, but we talk about what technology is best for. Just a word of difference, but at the same time, a world of difference. And that's why we have today two people that are very experienced in this field, but they're not technocrats. They're not technology maniacs. And the first one is Andrea Faré,
Hello, everyone.
Founder of Leapfrog. They work a lot with teams, so their website is leapfrog.team, link in description. And they focus on companies' organization, but in a very interesting way, focusing a lot on people and giving people the chance to express themselves, affect the company future, really, by creating a meaningful working environment. And they focus on the hard stuff, on company policies, organization, and so on, but at the same time, on the soft side of doing business together, which means human relations and how to get along and work together as a team. Second guest we've seen before, but it's always a pleasure to have him back with us, Alberto Firpo, the co-founder of Agile Lab. Agile Lab is more of an IT company, and that's why our website is agilelab.it, link in description again. And now, without further ado, let's dive into this topic. It's interesting because it's a very important aspect of data mesh, but sometimes it's heavily undervalued and people don't pay enough attention to it. So let's start with why we have Andrea and Alberto together today. I think that could be a nice beginning. Alberto, why did we invite Andrea with us today?
Well, it's very simple because actually we are working with Andrea on the organizational perspective, not just within Agile Lab, I mean with the internal organization of Agile Lab, but also because we have discovered this nice link between how the new work, organizational work could fit into the data mesh initiative, generally speaking. And so we thought we need the best of the best to do that. And so that's why we have collaborated with Andrea in creating what we think it could be the data mesh blueprint that normally we can employ with our customers and so on. This is why we have engaged together in this new kind of initiative.
Excellent. Andrea, a question for you. When we talk about data mesh and the new paradigm with Alberto, I always get the feeling that it's so obvious. Why haven't people thought about it before? It makes so much sense. So what I would like to ask you is, what is changing or has changed in your experience in the enterprise organization in the last years? And let's focus on two perspectives: pure organization and data organization.
Great. Thanks a lot for the question and for the great introduction, Alberto and Nicola. Thanks from everyone from having me, and hello everyone, all the listeners. Yes, I'll leave probably the data organization part to Alberto, who's more of an expert in this field, but maybe I'll start tackling the purely organizational things that we are witnessing at the moment. So it's an era of big change, of big trends. But unfortunately, the bigger the companies and the slower the change. We are in a particular time in history where we have a discrepancy between our Paleolithic brains that are buried in medieval organizational structure, but we are facing the 20th century technological and societal challenges. And this puts the organization under big challenges. And the complexity of the modern times is calling for different ways to cope with the way we organize. And we are trying to address these needs. But unfortunately, we are still stuck in organizational paradigms where we are separating the decision power from who's actually getting their hands dirty with the work. Some organizations, some even bigger organizations, are venturing in these new practices, new organizational paradigms, and some of them have adopted them at scale, but the majority of them is still looking at these paradigms from a distance. And what we are witnessing mostly is that two things are happening. Either we are completely dismissing the organizational aspect and just focusing on the leadership aspects. So there's a lot of preaching about how the leaders and the managers should behave in a different way and empower people. And on the other hand, and this we believe is the right path to take, some companies are actually starting to doing experiments. But these experiments have begun in a way that is not really appropriate. So some of the patterns of the organizational patterns that are strictly bound to agile practices and have been forced into the organization. So there's been this trend of adopting agile practices where Scrum teams, for example, have been pushed into any places in the organization. And this has created a little bit of a discouragement for the new, because this is not the right way to approach this kind of experimentation. In the 60s, Melvin Conway said that any organization that designs a system will produce a design whose structure is a copy of the organizational communication structure. And data mesh is an example that shows us why this has to be true. We cannot address the way we manage data today on the purely hierarchical organizational paradigm. And I think data mesh is a great occasion to look at the way we organize in a different way. Getting up from the purely team dynamic aspects into the data value dynamics we want to embrace. And so data mesh implies a communication structure that is non-hierarchical in nature, but it's mostly peer-based at a level that goes well beyond the single team. So, and it calls for principles such as transparency, distributed authority, evolutionary learning, autonomy. So it gives an occasion to actually walk the talk. Before we were saying, okay, I love this principle, we have a hard time putting them into practice. Here we have an occasion to start putting them into practice. Do you want your data to help you in the best way it can? If the answer is yes, then maybe this is an approach that's technical and organizational at the same time that you can follow. And maybe Alberto, you wanna talk about the data perspective, because it's more of your area of competence.
Yeah, sure. I agree with you when you say that this could be for an enterprise company a huge opportunity to start the change. Obviously, this change is everlasting, because when we talk about change in the organizational perspective, I mean, regarding data management organization, it starts from the what I say it is the 1.0 organization many years ago when I started work, so many years ago, and you too, Andrea, because we are almost the same age. And at that point, organizations were subdivided into business units that asked for requirements and results to IT units that were very consistent, because everything was in the IT unit. I mean, in terms of knowledge, data, and capabilities at the time. So everything very consistent from that perspective. Obviously, with poor capabilities in terms of building kind of what we consider today at the edge. I mean, in terms of machine learning stuff and so on. In some cases, a little bit messy, because everything was done in a DVH, and then the DVH was for everything. Was for OLTP workload, OLAP workload. It didn't work so well. And so at the time, somebody said, 8 years ago or something like that, we throw away the silos, we put the data into a central environment, the famous data lake, and everything will work with magic. We can generate value, and we can go on from the 1.0 organization to the 2.0 organization. But actually, the organization didn't change so much, because it became a bottleneck. This kind of new pattern became immediately during the years a bottleneck, because it generated a central team, and when you have to centralize activities, you become a bottleneck at that point. So business units from the outside ask for results, a requirement to a central team. This central team is very technological evolved, very skilled, but do not understand so much about data, the data meaning. And so the knowledge didn't follow the shift to the central technological IT data lake. And this pattern, obviously, is an anti-pattern from the organizational perspective. And the 3.0 organization that data mesh is promising overcome this kind of pattern, and it goes from a data producer, data consumer kind of perspective, which is distributed. We always talk about that, the distribution of the ownership. If you need to scale, you have to distribute, generally speaking. And this is obviously, this is an opportunity. Why? Because when we talk about it in the corporates and in the enterprises, when they have learned and understand that this pattern at architectural standpoint and also organizational one is the future, they immediately recognize that there is a gap. And they say, okay, it works in my mind from the ideal standpoint, but how I can change my organization, because I'm stiff. And so there's a breakthrough to overcome. And when there is a change to be made, the solution is simple. You need to start and to iterate from the beginning. Otherwise, the change will never start. And that's why I think it is an opportunity, because data mesh implies that these new distributed units about domains introduce clarity and transparency regarding who does what. And this is a huge opportunity to establish a starting point, which is the organizational data mesh blueprint. To start with, obviously, the starting point is not the end point. So it's something that evolves iteratively. When you need to start the change, you need to iterate, and starting from a first milestone, and then from there go and change and evolve daily or monthly, depending on what the organization needs to be done in a very lean, logic way. And this is the opportunity that I see from this perspective. So engaging the change through this need of transparency, and from the organizational perspective, have a blueprint, reference blueprint to start with and to evolve with.
Alberto, if I may, I see how data mesh helps with this change, looking at the future. But a lot of times I see a big split, a big divide in companies, where there is a formal structure, usually hierarchical, like a pyramid, and then a very different work structure, how things are done, how things flow, and so on. Does data mesh address this split and finds maybe a solution on how to homogenize these two?
Well, this problem is a problem that is spread around many organizations, data mesh apart. Obviously, when you have the formal organigram, you need it, because in terms of formal staff managing budgets and so on, is something that is that the organization needs. Then, from the working perspective, what needs to be avoided is workarounds, organizational workarounds, or something that is implicit and not clear. Obviously, As I said before, data mesh is an opportunity to introduce transparency and clarity in the organization. Obviously, just regarding the data management organization, not the whole company, because data processes are not the 100% processes in a company. Most of the time they are at the core, and so they are important. It is important as well to go fast and to have a very fast time to market. And if you want to have a fast time to market, you need to be efficient in your organization. And if you want to be efficient, you need to have a clear transparency of ownership, accountabilities, and so on. So the work explicit organization must be very clear, must be at the light of the sun. So everybody need to understand who does what, and this principle is one of the concepts of data mesh. So I don't know, for example, if you are a business service unit and you need to implement a new data product, everything must be clear. You need to watch your organization in terms of data domains in a very clear way with a clear structure. You need to employ the functionality, self-service functionalities that you have to build something in your domain. You need to interact very clearly with other domains, understanding if the informations and the data that you need are somewhere already in place. Otherwise, if they are not in place, you need to ask to someone to develop something mainly, and you need to understand very clearly who does what. So which is the interface, or who is the interface in terms of roles that you need to engage to ask something to be done. And so this kind of communication, so communication bus, I could say, must be supported in a very clear and transparent way. Clarity and transparency must be explicit and in some cases written, because there is the most clear stuff to be understood is written. So when you write something and it's clear for everybody, that there's no need to be misunderstood. There's no misunderstanding, generally speaking, and this is an organizational pattern that is very important to be implemented in the different teams and in the different roles that are inside of each team in the data mesh blueprint. That has obviously its features and its specific teams and so on. So what needs to be clear are subdivisions of teams. What would be inside the governance team, IT central team? What are the teams inside of this central governance team? What is the purpose of each team? What are the accountabilities of each team? And then defining what are the roles, the accountability of that roles, everything written and clear. Because if you write something, no misunderstanding. And from this perspective, Andrea knows very, very well, 100% what needs to be done.
Yes, it's an interesting, if I may, Nicolò, because you touched on a very interesting topic, that the fact that we have a formal and a work organization. And the funny thing is that this separation between these two aspects has never been as strong as it is today. In the beginning, the formal organization was exactly the organization of work, because reality was much simpler than it is today. If we look at mass religions or big armies, your hierarchical organization was perfectly reflecting what was needed at the time. And even in the first big companies of the early 20th century, like Ford, I mean, Henry Ford knew exactly how his cars were made down to the single screw, because they weren't as complex as they are today. So what we did was we kept those paradigms, those ways to structure the organization, which are based on organizing the people in a relationship of dependency between each other, which is okay. It describes a specific part of reality that we need. We needed to maybe attribute to a career ladders sometimes, or to attribute wages. But we have separated the work, the complexity of the work as separated from that. So we need different tools. We have to organize the work now, not the people. And in order to organize the work, you need to adopt a different grammar, because the relationship that take place, and data mesh is a perfect example, that are n-dimensional. It's like the metric organization or the hierarchy, the pyramid are not enough to describe the kind of complexity that needs to take place in order for data mesh to work. So you need to have a different grammar that describes how the roles interact, and that's exactly what we did when we developed this blueprint.
Andrea, I was thinking decades ago in the Fordian work ethics, work organization, there was this saying that the right hand must not care and must not know what the left hand is doing, because it's up to the head to control them both.
Right.
So it used to be that you were either the right hand or the left hand, and in a way your universe was defined in that.
Yes.
How does the new organization and these new tools that put transparency at the center change the role of the individual?
Right. Well, I would add another quote for Henry Ford, which is even which it's important to remember, because he used also to say, every time I ask for a pair of hands, they come with an ad attached. So he was complaining about the fact that the hands he was looking for actually had a brain who wanted to think for himself, and he had already all the things planned out. So we still need the specialization. We still need the right hand to do one thing and the left hand to do into different things, and to have several hands. But we need those brains. We need to leverage on collective intelligence in order for this to work, for the organization to become alive. So the life of individual in the working environment that values collective intelligence changes completely, because now we can express autonomy, mastery, and purpose, which are the main motivators of any individual at work. In order to do that, you need an organizational structure where you are given several possibilities that were not given before. First, with the clarity of your roles, you also receive the mandate to make decisions in this role, which is not always clear in traditional ways of organizing. In the traditional ways of organizing, it's always the manager delegating, and it's never clear formally what is delegated and what is not. It's up to the management style of the manager. What we laid out here is instead, okay, the data mesh architecture, in order to work, requires that these interactions take place. And these interactions must take place because we have people with brains who are there making decision in the domain where they are allowed to make the decision. And this obviously gives you a completely different approach to work. It's not only more clear what is expected from you when you actually do the work, because you have a list of accountabilities. You can go beyond those, but at least you know those are expected from you, and you have the authority to make decision. It makes clear what skills are needed for you to fill those roles, and that's also an important aspect. So these are very important aspect to actually enable people to apply and use their intelligence for the collective need of the organization. So this also increases the quality of work. But another important aspect is that, because we are talking about the blueprint here, like me and Alberto and other people and other colleagues at Agile Lab, we have defined this blueprint, but a blueprint should not be considered something that stays there and printed in stone. And this is another aspect that we have to bring to the table. Not only the static way we describe the relationship, but also the dynamics of evolution of the organization. And it is important that when an organization adopts such a blueprint, it starts intervening on it, adapting it to what it needs based on the tensions, on the needs that are felt by the people who are filling this role these roles, the different roles in the blueprint. So this is another energy. We have to get rid a little bit of the traditional concept of org design, where a consultant comes, gives you the blueprint, and you take it, and because that's the approach we've had for ages, right? And the organization becomes old as soon as you put it in place. So you need a mechanism by which you reflect continuously on that organization. And maybe you start tweaking a role here and there. Okay, in our specific organization, as we adopt this blueprint. Can we add this accountability here? Now that we have this clarity, because before you didn't have anything to add stuff to. Not only you were not involved in the process of modifying it, but you didn't have even the clarity. So now you have the clarity, and you can leverage on that clarity to make the small modification, put the right decision processes in place, so that the blueprints really adapts to the reality of your organization, which is not monolithically equivalent for all the organization, especially for the biggest one, the enterprise organization, who are going to adopt these patterns. They span across several countries. They are in completely different business. So it would be unreal for us to expect that they adopt the blueprint as it is without modifying it over time.
Sure, totally agree. And I add that point which is very important. So adapting dynamically the organization is something that is really, really important when you need to change. We have said it before, but I would like to underline it more and more, because actually the most important fear that I can recognize in those big companies is that the fear of change. So we have this breakthrough, I don't know where to start, but the most important thing to be understood is not the starting point, but is how you move constantly into the change, because this is the first driver to be understood. Is not just now I need to change, I need to go from status A to status B. What happens in status B? There's no status B. Exactly. There's an always moving and adapting structure. Obviously, when I think about specifically to a data mesh structure, it means that, I don't know, new domains are coming during the time. There is a matter, obviously, of how we can fit the starting point to an initial legacy organization that we have. But it's very important to go through the change and adapting to the real needs of the department. Obviously, in this specific case, the data management department and the stakeholders that are involved.
Yes, I agree. Things must start with the design, obviously. You always have to start with the design, and we did so by starting with, we took something from a holonic organizational principle to team topologies. We looked at the value streams, what are the supporting function, what are the platform components that we need from the organization, from the organizational standpoint. But this is just a starting point, and it is important that it is then somehow customized and made your own by each organization who adopts it. So I think it's a good terrain of experimentation, because finally we go beyond the single team, and we start using some technology patterns to actually affect the organization in a positive way. So I think it's a great occasion to experiment.
Well, excellent. Thank you both for your time. For me, it's always very interesting to see, especially considering Agile Lab that really produces and implements these data mesh architectures and solutions, that they're never trying to sell it. They always say, no, but data mesh is not something that you buy and fixes things. You have to really get involved, to really think, to really leverage these to achieve great success. And then it's a very fresh, very novel approach, considering how many people would just say, no, just buy a data mesh or two and things will be okay. I also think it's a very complex and exciting scenario, this of changes in the business structure and the enterprise structure. So I invite all of you to join this discussion in the comments. I promise we will be reading all of them and hopefully answering them either in writing or in a new video. Do consider subscribing to the channel, because we'll keep talking about data mesh in practice and all that it entices, not just the technology, but what it means and what changes it brings along. If you like the video, press the like button. If you didn't like the video, press the dislike button twice, so it's very clear. And we'll see you in the 6th episode of Tech Talk very soon. Thank you all.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Ciao.
Ciao.